I'm gonna eat. Really?
Strictly.
I don't know. Sitting in. Come on. Only sitting.
Getting audio.
He's been talking.
I think he was. Sorry about that.
You didn't want to be the first.
No, never. Never the first.
Yeah. Down some back and forth. We're gonna ask you lots of questions.
session, and Chatham Emergency Services is here to present.
So for those who don't know me, I'm Bill Coster. I'm the COO of Chatham Emergency Services. Can everybody hear me okay? I know I have a loud voice and I can project. They offered me the microphone, but I didn't want to blow anybody's eardrums. So with that, I have CEO Chuck Kearns with me and our fire chief, James Vickers, as well. I have a few slides just to kind of open it up, introduce some of the questions will probably be answered based on the presentation I have, just an introduction to the fire operation as a whole. I know there were some questions about our budget. I know the workshop here to talk about the subscription collection process that the county has done, and I'll defer to you all on that. As a reminder, about a year ago this month, we presented our budget for the current fiscal year that we're in. It is about $3.2 million. You can see up on the slides, this is what that budget comprised of. The vast majority of that is wages and benefits, and then also insurance. There is a breakdown. Again, this is the same slide that presented a year ago. We've been right on target by and large for our budget. There's been some categories that have been over, some that have been under, but we've been pretty even with what we budgeted so far this year. There's been some anomalies.
He meant 13.2 million, not 3.2 million.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, 13.2 million. There's been some anomalies in some categories, but as budgets go, we're pretty far on, or right on target year to date. As a little bit of history, as I know there's been some questions as to our budget, Chatham Emergency Services and the part of our fire division, Chatham Fire, we cover 56% of Chatham County. So all the unincorporated area, if you were to tally all that square mileage up, it's 56% of the county. So we are the largest fire department by service area coverage in the entire county. Granted, the city of Savannah, with the density of population downtown, they have some higher densities, but from a coverage area, regardless of whether houses are 2 feet away from each other or 2 acres away from each other, we cover the largest area in the country. To that extent, for our costs as far as our value, you can see we're near the bottom of the list there. We have 14 fire stations, and it costs us about just shy of $1 million to staff and operate every one of those fire stations. Savannah, they've got 15 fire stations. They're larger than us as it relates to the count. You can see the rest of the numbers. They kind of speak for themselves. So we're pretty committed to the value that we provided over time and still provide today. If you were to break it down, just look at it from a different angle, knowing that, again, we are the largest fire department for the area. If you were to say, hey, per square mile of coverage, we are darn near the last one at about $54,000 per square mile of coverage, whether it's on Tybee, whether it's on Skidaway, whether it's out on Fort Argyle, whether it's on Wilmington Island or the south side. That is our current cost to protect that area. I have to give a little bit of an asterisk for Tybee on this particular slide, not to poke at their fire department, but they have a smaller footprint because they're so geographically dispersed or displaced from the rest of the area. So they do have a higher cost if you were to evaluate it per square mile. So that's not to poke at them necessarily. There are some considerations that they have. So leading into that, there were some questions in regards to our previous fire expenses, so I want to start on the right-hand side of this slide. In fiscal year 2021, there's about $11.4 million in actual expenses for the fire department alone. I should have opened with this, but I'll clarify, this is just the fire department. This does not include EMS at all. So Chatham Emergency Services' total budget is in collaboration of several areas, but this is, when we're talking fire department, this is just fire operations, direct and indirect costs for those. In fiscal year 2021, you see we went to $12.2 million. That was a 7.2% increase over the previous year. Inflation was about 6%. So there was some other increases that I'll get to here in just one second. I will note this was prorated because with Chatham aligning with the county budget, it was a short year, so these are prorated numbers. We actually ended our fiscal year in 10 months to adopt ourselves to the county cycle. The current year that we're in, as I mentioned, we're at about $13.2 million, which is about 7.4% increase over the previous year. On the flip side, on the left side, you can see our income. This is what, again, prompted us to approach the county to begin with, saying, hey, the subscription model just isn't keeping up. People aren't paying We've increased rates, it's not working, it's just not keeping up, and I know you guys are experiencing that yourself to an extent. So in fiscal year 2021, we brought in just shy of $6 million of subscription income, creating a significant deficit. In 2021 to 2022, again, prorated plus the changeover. It's very difficult to anticipate what that number might have been, but rudimentary math said, all right, $7.5 million again there. Of course, the current year that we're in, because we are fully funded, we are not operating at a deficit because of the approach that the county has taken, and we're appreciative of that. A couple points of note, we have 130, and yes, there's a part-time person that works for us. All those, of those 130.5 staff, 128 of those are on the fire engines. So we only have, our fire chief, our deputy fire chief, and then one other person that is not actually on a fire engine every single day or some type of fire apparatus. We are experiencing a vacancy rate. The whole world is slightly understaffed, so we do have some, we've been operating a little bit below budget as far as our wages go because of the vacancy, but we've been hiring, recruiting, and retaining folks for this. ISO, we talked about that at length, making sure that we're covered. ISO continues to move the needle as far as what is needed. A lot of that is staffing, and I'll get to that here just on the next slide. But I want to point something out as it relates to our wages, not only from a staffing standpoint. Yes, we are the cheapest, darn near the cheapest fire department in the county, but a lot of that has been on the backs of our people. We do employ volunteers. We're incredibly grateful for our volunteers who respond to us. We don't pay them an hourly wage. We buy them a Christmas dinner every year. That historically has been our bench strength, in the sense that in the 80s and the 90s, we had lots of volunteers. The current climate in the country, volunteerism is just difficult, nearly impossible to get. We've had to add paid staff. But for our paid staff, we are the lowest in the county as far as what we're paying our firefighters. This has created a detriment for us, where they'll come to us, we'll train them, they'll work for us, and then they'll go to another fire department where they can make more money. So we've been trying to address that, to attract and retain our own folks. We've got some great firefighters, men and women, and our volunteers, but we are working on that. So one of the questions was, hey, what caused the budget to go up? Yes, there's inflationary increases. The biggest piece is purely the firefighters. The wages and salaries. You can see over the 2 years, a 44% increase in our wages and benefits. Again, these are just our firefighters and our firefighting staff. So recruiting, training these folks, making sure that our pay is competitive, making sure that our benefits are competitive, that has been our largest source of increase. Secondarily to that, I listed 3 items. Insurance, workers' comp insurance is very, very difficult, very expensive. Unfortunately, a couple weeks ago, if you didn't watch the news, one of our fire trucks was hit head-on by a dump truck. Not our fault, our firefighters are okay, but that's a $600,000 piece of apparatus that now we have to fight with insurance. And it might be that we're gonna have to absorb that cost because of insurance rules, and I won't belabor that. But not at any reason, our truck was sitting still and somebody came into our lane and totaled out our fire truck. So insurance is very, very expensive. In addition, granted, it's not a huge $1 million expense, but fuel. Diesel fuel, we talked about working with the county for some savings there. Fuel prices have gone up. And then lastly, capital depreciation. Because of the deficit that the fire department has been running over the last many, many years, our stations are significantly behind in need of repair and updating. Our apparatus, I am pleased to report that we're getting our first new apparatus in probably 15, 20 years as it relates to a ladder truck, our first new ladder truck. We're excited about that, but there's a lot of things that have been past due. So with that, I know I've taken, and I didn't mean to speed through it if you think I did, but I really, this is a workshop. I want to just provide some context and some opening comments and some numbers. I know some people are really, really interested in the numbers. So with that, I'll pause for any questions or insight you'd like to add. And you'll have to speak up because with the pollen's got me plugged up.
I'm just curious, on page 4, in 2 years, you had a 44% increase in your wages and benefits?
Yes. So that's not a 40, to be clear, that's not just like everybody got a 40% raise. That is added staff. We have had to add about 42 firefighters to our total count.
That just looked high.
Commissioner Milton?
So what is the average salary of a firefighter?
For us, starting out, it's just shy of $38,000 a year. So there is some overtime built in that, but some of the challenges we have is to be a firefighter, I'll pay you $11.36 an hour, but you go to Chick-fil-A and make more than that. And it's a tough environment. And for what our people do, the amount of training they have to have, the dedication they have, it is a labor of love, and we've got great people that do it.
See, you broke down fire cost per fire station and per square mile. Did you break it down by chance for per household?
I did not. I can absolutely certainly do that for you.
I think that would give us a much better comparison.
Okay. Yeah, I'd have to go back to the math and calculate it, but I can do that for you.
Because, for instance, the city is much more densely populated. It is a truer.
Also unable to keep up with ISO requirements. What happens to the people's insurance without the ratings? Is it an automatic set higher rate?
So it varies based on insurance agency, whether State Farm, Progressive overall, but as your ISO rating changes, I can't comment to each one, but it does affect that.
Okay, so when did y'all become unable to keep up with ISO requirements? At what point?
Several years ago. As volunteers, back in the, and I'm gonna speak anecdotally a little bit here, back in the 80s, you needed one person to get a fire truck to a scene, and you'd get 20, 30, 40 volunteers. So you've got now 40 people to put out that fire.
Right.
As volunteerism has declined, now we've got 2 people per fire truck, and we might get 1 volunteer to a fire. So we're bringing more and more fire trucks, more paid staffing, and minimum, we need 16, 17 firefighters on a scene to be safe. And there are times we don't meet that, so we have to bring in more and more apparatus. So I couldn't point to an exact date and time, but I would say it's been eroding for the last 10, 15 years at least.
Okay. So there have been no ratings, no ISO ratings in the last 10 or 15 years?
No, what now?
No ratings?
No, we just got reviewed last year. Our rating is looking to change down. We're making some efforts to adjudicate that as much as possible, but we're not on the back end of that just yet.
So for years, Commissioner, we've been ranked as an ISO 2. When they came in and looked at us, they said, it looks like you're going to be an ISO 4. We were going to drop 2 spaces. But Chief Vickers has done a lot of heroic things in trying to score as many points as we could, built a new training center for live fire training and things like that. And we think we're going to probably get rated as a 3, so down 1 notch, if you will.
That ladder truck I talked about is going to be a big piece.
Just to be a little easier to understand, instead of reading unable to keep up with the ISO requirements, it should have simply stated dropped 2 levels and potentially 1. Because I did not obviously understand what that meant.
It's just not finalized yet. We're waiting for ISO to give their final determination. But basically, we've been in a year of an appeal process trying to earn back as many points as we can.
How many firefighters per capita do we have when compared to the city of Savannah?
So I don't know their total count maybe for Savannah, but we put 2 firefighters per engine. They have 4 per engine. So they are staffed twice as good as we are, if you look at it that way. I know Pooler is 3, Garden City, the rest of them are between 2 and 3.
Okay, well, for future funding of the fire department, I think it's virtually impossible for us on the commission to know whether we're doing good or bad without the per capita firefighters in comparison to every municipality we have here in the county, and without knowing the average cost per household from the different various agencies. At that point, I think we can compare apples to apples to see what bang for buck, and I'm not doubting that we're getting bang for buck. It's just, we're being irresponsible, but we were thrust into a situation of saving a fire department to start with, But now we've got time to actually make sure that we're running it as efficiently as possible. So if we can get those figures, it would be a big help for us.
So a rudimentary way to do the math, and I might look to you, Jeannie, do you know how many property pins there are in the unincorporated areas that we serve?
36,042.
Okay, so basically I took 13.2 million, divided it by 36,000, and come up with $366.67. But that's not accurate because that also includes all the large commercial properties like the apartment complexes and warehouses. But that's a thumbnail, and we can break out the commercial properties from the
That
residential.
would be great. And if you could do it with the other departments, it would be kind of wonderful for us to be able to see what we're comparing to. And
The good news is we love data, so we'll
Yeah.
punch all the data you want.
that would be great. Anybody else up here on the commission with a question, comment?
I just would like to get a copy of that whole breakdown.
And the other thing, and you're probably aware of this, but maybe for the sake of the people watching, every 6 months, there's, pins that change. People will parcel off their lands, and now you got another pin or dozens more pins, so that's always going to be a moving target. Basically, they settle on it once every 6 months.
We'll ask Chuck to send that information to our office, and we'll make sure it's disseminated to the full board.
I'll just,
Well, I mean,
Go
you
ahead.
gave us the average salary of the firefighter, but at some point, I'd like to get the salaries of everyone, so we can sort of see what these salaries look like.
can we get that from y'all also?
We've submitted that before, but we'll do it again.
All right.
In our department or in all the fire departments?
In your department.
Okay. Yeah, we've submitted that in the past.
Anybody else? Okay, Michael, where do we go from here?
Ms. Jennings, I'm gonna turn it over to Ms. Jennings. We're gonna do a briefing on strategic planning, and we're gonna look more at our blueprint, and we're gonna actually try to weigh in and make some decisions today help us make some decisions today. So, Harry.
While we're waiting to get started, I just want to introduce some of the people in the room that the commissioners may not know. This is finance here. This is our fire fee appeals lady, Nicole.
Sir.
We have internal audit here. They've really worked hard on the fee structure for the fire fee to help us data mine. And then on the road, the top row over here, we have Board of Assessors representatives who we've been working with on all the fire fee appeals as well. They've been going out and working on the square footage appeals, and Nicole's been working on any other kind of appeals. So we're still going through all the appeals. I think we have a meeting next week, or into this week. Yeah, tomorrow. We're going back through those as they come in. And then, as I said, Board of Assessors is sending their appraisers out and doing what they can to resolve the appeals on the square footage.
Nicole also reconciles all the.
Sounds a lot. She's been doing a lot. But anyway,
There has been a question. We are going to have another session. Once we get through this round of appeals and everything, then we'll come back to the board. We've got some, I guess, decisions we've got to make along the fire fee, billing, and those kind of things.
Good afternoon. So I am Tara Jennings, as many of you already know. We're going to go through kind of a recap of the work that we've done to date in regards to the strategic planning community needs assessment and some of the priorities as refreshers that you all selected in previous workshops, and then we'll go into some input time. So, just as a reminder, a few years ago when we did workshop, the board decided that the vision for Chatham County would would be that Chatham County, Georgia is the best place to live, work, and play. And the mission of Chatham County government is to protect and serve the public, provide essential services to improve the quality of life. I would assume, since I haven't heard from any of you, that you are comfortable with the vision and mission statement, and we're gonna keep going forward, correct?
Yes.
Good deal, okay. We hammered that one a few years ago. So some core values that have come up through the process that we've been working on. And these core values were driven by the board and then shared with our executive team and department heads consistently whenever we work with each of the departments on strategic planning. These are words that the board selected, again, during the strategic planning process. So it's the honesty through integrity, safety with justice, stewardship promoting transparency, efficiency with effectiveness, pride increasing respect, and teamwork producing achievement. So these are the things that not only the board directed to us, but the staff use them as we're determining goals and objectives for each of our department. That's basically the same thing. So just to kind of give you a timeline of what we've been doing and the process at which we've taken to this point. So it starts basically in 2008 when the city of Savannah, Chatham County, and United Way began a project to look at community level indicators. From there were some, probably about 20 to 25 indicators at that point in time, led by the United Way. Dr. Mike Toma was the one helping to collect some of that information. And if you can imagine in 2008, some of the transparency with data was really challenging, and where the data was accepted or where it was found was hard to find, and the integrity of it was difficult. So we didn't have as much. From there, fast forward to 2012, that group expanded to include the hospitals, and that information then became more of a public effort and expanded to the more than 100, today I think it's more than 200 probably, but as a result of that, we've done community forums, we've done town hall meetings, and then Liz Ann and I did it again last fall, for fall of 2021. And so we're just kind of recapping all of that stuff that we've been doing over that time period. So these were some priorities that individuals had indicated that were concerns facing the community. None of this is news to you. It's probably the same things you're hearing in your districts, but this is just as a reminder. Violent crime continues to be at the top. Mental health is within that top 5, and some other education pieces are in there. So then we did the fall, a survey in 2020, and basically we went out with kind of a lens of doing the blueprint, but also thinking about the ARPA and the opportunity we had with some federal funds to be able to allocate that. And so you'll see there the top part of the thing that came from the community was 46% of people thought that we should be addressing health. And that's obviously because of COVID, or we can assume it was because of COVID, because we were in the midst of that process. And then if they had $100, how would they spend it? And you can see that 30% of the respondents indicated services to disproportionately impacted communities, which aligns with the ARPA legislation. And then the second part was infrastructure, closely followed behind that with public health. So just as a quick snapshot, what you have been given, so the board specifically in their clear folder should include a lot more data, but I just took out a few things based on what you guys have been talking about lately. So in looking at the poverty, the people living below poverty, this is, the blue represents Chatham County, the orange represents the state of Georgia, and the green represents how we compare to the U.S. So the first set of data is specifically people living below poverty. The second set is severe housing problems. And what that second set is referencing is not necessarily the fact that we don't have affordable housing, but that is more specific to those individuals who are living in unsafe housing. So it may be that they're mold. It could be that there's not enough room for the entire family in the house, or you've got multiple families living in the house. So there's a lot of things that go into that severe housing problem. This is not about homelessness, and this is not about people who are living on the street. This is people who actually have a house, but it might not be healthy. Okay? So then you move over to education. The blue line there shows you the quality child care centers that are rated in Chatham County, and you see a slight increase in that. The red line toward the top shows you the high school graduation rate for the Chatham County Public School. And again, I just pulled out a couple. That's not to say that those are the only ones we have, but those are just some things based on our conversations that we've been working on that the board has directed staff to focus on. In health, we have also been trying to address the food security rate. Again, you'll see the blue there as we compare to the state and to the US. I think we're doing fairly well in that space. The second one is your frequent mental health distress. We're higher than the others in this category as well, which I don't know if that's a positive thing, but it does impact some of the other stuff that we're dealing with. And this is self-reported mental health distress. Be mindful that this is not the doctor saying you're in mental distress. This is an individual self-reporting, I've been stressed or I've been depressed. And so imagine if it was actually a clinical assessment, you would probably see the numbers higher. And then the final column is your suicide-adjusted death rate, which is closely impacted to the second column there. And again, we're above the state average. Again, quality of life, the two things I pulled out for us to talk about or just to view was the recidivism rate for adult offenders. This is showing you the decline that the Chatham County Detention Center has observed from 2019 to 20 to 21. I will have to asterisk this by saying, in the middle of 2020, the intake process for the detention center shifted. So he no longer takes misdemeanors. So that does have an effect on this number. Okay. Meanwhile, the juveniles that had been adjudicated repeat offenders actually has gone up. So, because they don't have all the same things. So that's what we're dealing with in this space. So Chatham County has kind of had like our defining roles, if you will, about the things that we're doing. And so we look at these projects and we say, are we actually going to do it like public safety? We have a police department. In some cases, it could be that we're the collaborative partner. So we are at the table, but we are not leading the process. We're not funding the process. We can be a convener and a facilitator. So we actually convene the group of people to come up with solutions. We can be the investor or the funder. In some cases, we are the influencer. And sometimes we are multiple roles depending on what the board has dictated. So when I say priorities, depending on the board's direction, it kind of helps determine what role the county will take on these issues. Okay? So originally, when we did the blueprint goals about 3 or 4 years ago, some of the top things that the board determined at that point in time was early childhood care and education, economic development, engaging students, parents, and the community, food access and food insecurity, juvenile diversion, mental health access and treatment, people living, specifically children living below poverty, public safety and crime reduction, sidewalks, trails, bike paths, recreational facilities, parks and green space, and recidivism of adults and adolescents. So, over the past 4 years, that's what we've been working on. As a result of that, you'll see we have here within economy, we serve as the investor and the influencer of Chatham County employees. So one of the things that the board decided to do was to make sure that our employees had a minimum wage rate increase, and that has continued. We also fund Step Up for a workforce investment program. We are a collaborative partner and a funder in the space of funding the employability and the workforce readiness program through juvenile court. We also fund the City of Savannah, Chatham County Land Bank Authority, and Family Promise, and all of those fit within the economy space. Within education, specifically in the early child care space, we are partners with the Child Care Resource Referral Center and the Indicators Coalition and CETA and some of the work that they've done to get child care centers quality rated. Greenbrier our Children's Center, West Broad YMCA, and then we have the Early Childhood Learning Center with East Savannah United are things that we have been roles in. And then in addition to that, when it comes to the parents and community, we fund Summer Bonanza. We also have a partnership with Live Oak Public Library, the Youth Commission, and the UGA Extension Service. In health, we are actively working on the Parks and Recreation space. We are a funder of the Savannah Parkinson's Group, which is specifically for those individuals that have Parkinson's for structured activities. We fund the Forsyth Farmers Market. We also are a collaborative partner with the Second Harvest piece, and that's part of a federal grant that we have for that. And then we support Healthy Savannah with the REACH piece that they're doing as well. In indigent health, we are funding, we're an investor with the Public Health Department in addition to the state. We also support the Chatham County Safety Net Planning Council, Curtis V. Cooper, J.C. Lewis, and MedBank. And then in mental health space, we serve a variety of roles, one of those being Breaking the Cycle, which is to reduce the individuals with mental health at the jail. And then we fund the Behavioral Health Crisis Center. And in quality of life, we have public safety. So we're obviously doing public safety where we have taken on communications, we've taken on 911, and the police department since we originally started the blueprint and the planning process. We also have been doing some other things in that space with search and rescue. We are a funder of Brightside, which is your court-appointed advocates, the Crime Stoppers, Union Mission, and Victim Witness Youth Intercept Program. And then in the space of sidewalks, we are actively doing, at the time that we were talking about this, we have completed the Truman Linear Trail, or at least the county's portion of that, so that's great. And then we move over into the juvenile space. We fund Deep Center, Frank Callan Boys and Girls Club, Hugs, Park Place, Front Porch, and the Mediation Center. And each of these people, each of these programs I'm speaking of, report to us on a quarterly basis, and then you all see that usually after the third quarter with progress reports of how well they've been doing. So, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just based on conversations that I've had with you all, these are some things that I've heard are concerns from your citizens and maybe in your districts. Affordable income-based housing, climate change, drainage and stormwater, emergency response, gang activity, homelessness, hydrants, oral health, overdose deaths, resiliency, looking at solar panels and energy efficiency, substance abuse, transportation, wastewater treatment, and workforce development. That's a lot. So now the question becomes, do you keep doing everything I just referenced, along with adding some of this? Do you forego some of the other things and take on something new? Because we all know that, unfortunately, our sandbox of money isn't getting any bigger. What we do with the priorities that you help us with is when we find grants, it helps us to be intentional about those grants. And it helps us to drive some of that work. But we try to be open-minded to things that are emergent as things come up as well. Because we can sit here today and something could happen in 2 days that we weren't prepared for. So we have to be flexible. But I would appreciate hearing from you all, what is your, first of all, your philosophical thought process? Do you forego everything we've been funding and start something new? Do you keep some of that and add to it? What's your opinion of that?
Can some of them be brought together?
Consolidated? Well, we don't typically merge organizations, but we can merge initiatives.
I think you've zeroed in on a lot of the hot topics in discussion. I don't see mental health here, and with suicide rates with juveniles going up now, I do think that's an area that, it can be tied in with substance abuse or overdose deaths, because oftentimes a person that does suffer from a mental illness also has a problem with substance abuse.
So you want to keep what we're already doing, but you want to make sure it stays as a focus.
Yes, because the nationwide statistics and the statistics in the state of Georgia are still showing that we're not doing enough to address the situation.
Okay, all right.
So I'll just carry on from our meeting last Friday, reiterate the hydrants are locally lacking in the unincorporated area. Many of these areas were developed way before engineering took a great interest in how land was developed in Chatham County unincorporated area. Therefore, the infrastructure is not there. There's not enough water. There's no piping, and there's no hydrants in many different scattered areas throughout the unincorporated area. This is the only organization that can make a difference, the county commission, because we are their representatives. We are their city council, so to speak. So although getting water to all these places would be very expensive and difficult, there are a lot of geographical advantages we have, and we could use dry hydrants, and we could use nearby supplies of water from ponds and reservoirs and creeks or, there's lots of, the unincorporated area was very populated around the marshes and the creeks and such on the east side of the county. So I'd like to see more emphasis on some of these areas for dry hydrants where feasible. That's the low-hanging fruit. And then working with our water providers to what's the short-range and long-range plan to bring unincorporated urban-like environments. And unincorporated area is not a typical unincorporated area in the state of Georgia. State of Georgia, there's wide open spaces, lots of land, and not too many buildings. The unincorporated area in Chatham County is more like a densely populated city, and it standalone by itself would probably be one of the largest cities in Georgia, probably one of the top 10 or 20 size of a city. But yet we're unincorporated, and only this commission has any authority or any reason to go in there after the fact. Now, the engineering department's doing a great job of making sure that newly developed land is up to standards with good paved roads, with good drainage, with adequate water and that sort of thing before they're let to subdivide their property. So that's an area that this commission could work on to help their unincorporated residents. And it fits in many of those categories with health and safety to have a tool for the firemen to use, because those trucks run out of water very quickly in a big blaze, and they're so close together that they could easily catch one to another, and that would be catastrophic. So that's one item in the hot topics. The other one, which I believe when we had this conversation a couple of years ago, that was highly rated, was the wastewater treatment. The county has no wastewater treatment, just like we have no fire department. So how do you provide a modern, healthy, clean way of disposing of your sewage? And I can't recall in all the years I've been here where we've added any capacity as a county to the unincorporated area in the last 20 years. However, our population's growing by leaps and bounds. Now, some of the neighborhoods, are well taken care of and they're well thought out and planned, but there's so many places in the unincorporated area on the east side and I'm sure on the west side that were just, subdivided, put up a house, and maybe there was no soil science really incorporated in a lot of these areas. Therefore, the percolation rate when we get these 2 or 3 months of wet weather doesn't work. Now you got a health problem because you got stuff that can't go anywhere, and yet people are living and playing and sending their kids in the backyard. Or it's oozing out into the ditches, which drain into the marshes, which drain into the estuary. So these are not flashy items whatsoever, but the nuts and bolts of running local government, it falls in our lap to look at these solutions to real world issues. So I would like to see, that we use some county resources to reach some of these people, because otherwise they're not going to get reached unless the whole, a large acreage is completely bulldozed and started over as a development, and that's unlikely because you got so many different owners. So those are the two items that I see that could use a lot of assistance.
Did Mike go out? Hold on just a minute. Did Mike go out the door? Maybe Linda can. That's right. Maybe Linda. The the study and the graphics of where hydrants are now that engineering did. We have not shared it with them yet.
Well, I think CES actually did a hydrant study,
Right.
so we know where.
Have we shared that with the commissioners yet?
That's online.
It's online.
It's
yeah.
online. Okay.
CES website.
All right.
Also, engineering, we undertook a hydrant consultant, and we're looking at several areas where we don't have hydrants, and that report should be ready, hopefully by the end of.
Okay. That report is not. All right. It's coming. That's coming.
Well, I'm
And
glad.
we'll make some changes from there. That's coming.
Good.
So,
Go ahead.
so we're basically just talking about the money the federal government's given.
We're talking about your discretion money. We're talking about everything. What are your priorities? And we'll figure out where the funds come to fill those in.
Okay, well then, I would say that when you're talking emergency response, when you have it listed here, what was that? What does that mean, emergency response?
Well, so these are things that I've heard from some of the board members or the emails I've seen come through to try to respond back. One of the reasons I put that there was because we have some complaints about the response time when it comes to the paramedics, and then we also have a problem with the wall time. So it can be either one of those issues that we're trying to address. And we've all had conversations about it, but I wanted to bring it on here just to see if that was still something that resonated with the board members.
So I'll state this, and in my opinion, that's the number one thing that we have to address as the governing body trying to protect the citizens. Because without the emergency response, who are you gonna call with the overdose death? Who are you gonna call for the substance abuse? Who are you gonna call for homeless? I mean, they're the first people to address the major issues on here, so I do think that we need to, and I know the chief has done a good job for us trying to address 911, but due to the current employment, the way people just don't want to work nowadays, it's hard to find and train enough staff members. But that continues 911, and at no fault of his, but it continues to be a disaster where people are calling and sometimes no one answers, and that's a scary situation when you call 911 and no one actually answers. So I think we have to fix the emergency response first, I think, first and foremost, and then the other stuff falls under that. But that one
Just
to
to
me,
clarify what you're saying, when you say emergency response, you're saying the communications 911 where it starts at, or what piece are you specifically saying address?
the beginning, the start. It has to start with fixing 911.
We've, as recently as this week, we've been talking with the 911 director. We're looking at some innovative ways that we can address that issue. Because we know that, when someone calls 911, they expect the phone to be answered. And, we're looking at, some ways we can address that. And that's really, a top priority of mine when I present a budget to you this year, to make sure that we address those issues.
Is there such a thing as partner cities or partner counties where an overflow system, an example, I saw people complaining the other day that there was a major wreck on I-16, I'll say, I don't remember where. But naturally, if everybody's riding by calling 911, God, we'd have to have 1,000 911 operators to catch that flow, so I get not being able to answer it at that time. Is there such a thing as a partnership with neighboring counties where overflow would hit another area and they can dispatch for you, or?
Yes, there is, and we're working to try to get those agreements. We've had, depending on where you call from, particularly on cell phone in Chatham County, you'll get Bryan County's dispatch center. Right. We had that situation happen. We were talking with the garrison commander out at Hunter and Fort Stewart. They are willing to try to help us, and we're working on that. Before we merged the two departments, the city had a dispatch center and the county had one. So when the city or the county got inundated with calls, the other would assist. When we combined the two, we just hadn't kept pace with the growth in Chatham County, and that's something we're addressing now.
On the heels of that, where does 988 fall in with 911?
So 988 is funded by the feds to the state, Georgia Department of Behavioral Health, and they have a contract with Georgia Crisis Management Team. According to what we have learned, I still don't have the data from our 911 center, but according to what 911 staff are telling us is that the 988 call comes in, the mobile crisis team goes to the site, and when they get on site, then they're going to turn around and they're going to call 911. And they're going to ask for a dispatch for an ambulance to come get. So it's not it's just a triangular process but still, we're not diverting anyone. It's actually just adding time to the process.
That was my concern. Is it harmful or helpful?
Only anecdotally at this point, based on stories. That's why we're trying to get the data to understand it. And I know Chief McQuarrie's pulling some data for us, and Diane and her team are going to pull it so we can start figuring out, because it seems as though all it's doing is delaying the call to 911 because they're still calling and asking for transport, is my understanding.
Well, I mean, that's a little troubling, I think, to us, because, you know, we're responsible for 911, and if someone is calling 988 for help and they're getting pushed over somewhere else before they even get put through to 911, are we hurting or helping the situation?
I have my opinion, but I don't have data at this moment. I'm sure.
I guess.
Data come in.
Yeah, so I mean, we have heard the stories of what's happening, but we are still waiting on some information, and I have asked for that. So were you going to add something that I didn't know?
I thought that there was supposed to be some counseling available when 988 was answered.
And I think that does happen to some degree.
Right.
But what they're also hearing is that when the licensed clinician goes on the scene, the individual still needs to be transported for something much different than what they can provide. Therefore, they're calling 911. So
I guess
still coming into 911, it's just maybe an hour later after they've been assessed on the scene.
Then I guess my question is, should we look into whether this is working to the benefit of the individual, or is this adding another layer of red tape before the individual gets help?
So what I'll do is I'll add it under emergency response, and when you vote, that would be a task that staff would continue to explore to figure out the answers to that. We don't have that today.
Right, because the last thing I would want is for us to have a nationwide hotline that is not helping the situation.
Commissioner Lockett, I saw you had your hand up.
Yes, I did, thank you. My hot topic would be transportation, and I'm not so much talking about public transportation as I am about traffic. Especially with the growing out in the hot area there where Honda is going to be, and I know GDOT has a lot to do with that, but in the outlying areas here in Chatham, traffic seems to be a problem here lately, especially with the engineers, with the lights being synchronized and whatever it takes to move this traffic faster.
All right, so I put traffic management. Is that sufficient?
I think that would be appropriate.
Okay, all right.
I'll state I agree, everything that we can do within our jurisdiction and elected abilities, but we're talking multiple jurisdictions there, because you can ride down one road and it'll be the city of Savannah, unincorporated Pooler, Bloomingdale, all on this one road. So, yes, transportation, maybe just a simple coordinator that would work amongst all of the municipalities and governments. But even as he stated, out on where the new plant's going to be, that's actually Pembroke and Bryan County. So logically, the state, if the state ever worked logically, they would have extended this 6-lane I-16 all the way out to Pembroke to start with, instead of stopping it at 95, which is ridiculous. But so yes, we definitely need to do something with the transportation, but we're caught between a rock and a hard place on some of that.
I agree.
I see Milton's hand go up.
Yeah.
I kind of thought we had drainage as a priority already.
So what we did when we came to you last time with the monopoly money, that was specifically around the ARPA space, okay? This is just thinking about no funding stream specifically, just what are your priorities? If you want me to put drainage up here, I can add drainage if that's what you need.
Let's add drainage, thank you.
But also know already now, when you're talking about drainage and stormwater management, that's why we moved that $3.5 million to come up with that plan. Because if you don't present a concrete plan to the state and to the feds, you get none of their monies. And we can't fix that by ourselves, except that we talk about going up on people's taxes. Okay, so we're gonna have to include those things, but we've already made the first step, I think, in where we need to go. But now, when I look at that, I'm like Commissioner Picklighter. I think the very first thing on top of everything ought to be emergency, all right? And emergency response and emergency management, how we're doing that. We've already taken steps in that direction because we are trying to get the EOC Center up and running more than we can, but it still comes back to the point that even if we get the facility, we gotta have the staff, all right? And one of the things that we can point to that says we gotta have staff is the fire, remember they had out in District 1? And there were 42 calls within that 3-minute period, all right? And see, that jams up the system, all right? And plus what folks must understand about 911 is, I just don't say hello and you say, I need a fire truck here, or I need an ambulance here. They've got to get details, all right? So the staff person is tied up until they get the details, but in the midst of getting the details, they determine whether the fire need to go, whether the EMS need to go, whether the police need to go, or who needs to go, all right? So they're pushing those buttons at the same time they're gathering information. Now, that's not, I hope you don't take it as me making excuses for anything, all right? But we have to know this. When we took over the E911 system, we took over a 100-year system, and everything had to be updated. I'm talking about just a simple, from one phone line to another phone line, from one department to another, all that had to be updated, okay? And so we have made those strides to update those things, but I think that in the meantime, we have to put some temporary things in place to make it even better, okay? And we get it much better, then we can look at what. But again, when we go from, can you hold that list up again? And I'm just speaking about from where I sit. When we go from the emergency response, I think our next challenge, all right, is going to be under that mental health, and the mental health going to have to include the overdosing, the firemen and the police having those kits with them at every response, all right? It'd have to go into the substance abuse. And now, more now than ever, all right, a lot of reports are coming to me, and it's our children, all right? This new thing that we talked about sort of sparingly on last Friday, Kratom, all right? That's something that we need to pay attention to now, okay? Because we do have, I think, one death, and Helen can correct me if I'm wrong. I think we have one death in Georgia that has been a credit to that. But at our national conference, they stopped short of calling it opioid and under that epidemic, okay? But hearing from our national leaders, the commissioners all over the country, it's a problem now, and and I'm saying, if it's one problem, it's not a small problem. If one child died, it's not a small problem to me, all right? But I think that we need to look at the emergency response and all the things that are attached to that. I think we also need to look at the mental health and everything that's attached to that, all right?
And if I may, just to kind of clarify my thoughts earlier, I guess, I think we're talking about nothing more than shared versus individual responsibilities.
Correct.
We share responsibility to help with affordable income-based housing. We share with other municipalities and other government agencies the responsibility to work on climate change. We share drainage and stormwater management goals with everyone else. We share the responsibility on gang activity. We share it to fix homelessness. Hydrants, we do not share that. That's our direct responsibility of Chatham County to put hydrants in the unincorporated areas where they're needed. That's not shared. No one else is coming to the rescue. That's us. Oral health, it's shared. Many organizations, it's a shared responsibility. Overdose death, horrendous, but there's many of us working towards that. Shared again. Solar panels, shouldn't even be on the list, in my opinion, at this point for us. Substance abuse, shared responsibility. Transportation, wastewater treatment, if we're talking specifically unincorporated, that's our individual. Workforce development, that's something, again, shared in the area. But the number one thing, again, we are individually responsible for that emergency response. So that's the one thing, in my opinion, that doesn't need to be worked on. It needs to be completely fixed. Everything on there needs to be worked on. There is nothing on there that's not majorly important that we all need to dedicate ourselves to work towards. But that one thing is not only our responsibility, it can be fixed. There's less, well, I won't go there, but the other ones, none of it's an easy fix, but we're not gonna solve homelessness. We're not gonna solve many of those major problems. We can help put a dent with the other government agencies, but it is our responsibility, and we do have the ability to fix the emergency response system. So that should happen no matter what, and then all of the others are equally important.
Thank you.
So just one last thing on the emergency response. I know that locally we were working on the problem with wall time in hospitals. Is the state listening to us? Are they hearing us? Are they doing anything?
The state can't do anything, it's the hospitals. It's
I
the
thought it
hospitals.
was the state.
Well, the state sent out a guideline to the hospitals, but it had no regulatory teeth to it. It was more of a recommendation on releasing ambulances. We, as an agency, and me as a member of the state association, we applied for millions of dollars in ARPA grants to recruit, train, hire people off the streets and pay better. We didn't get funded on any of our grants. There's no friendly legislation offered up there this year either.
All right, so you all transport to an emergency room. You're not allowed to leave until a bed opens up, is that correct?
We are challenged to leave because the hospital oftentimes either doesn't have a bed or doesn't have staff to care for the patient. But what's happening is they're holding so many of our ambulances at busy times of the day that we can't respond to calls that are waiting.
That's my point. So what do we, as a body here, need to do to help free up your ambulances and your staff? Because, you know, these calls can come into 911, but if there's no one there to service them, then we've got a real problem. So I did have the experience with my elderly mother being in the hospital, and I got there and tried to release the emergency responders, and they told me I could not do that. So, you know, in this day and time when we've got hospital emergency rooms backed up and we've got problems occurring in our community and we can't get an ambulance to them or emergency responder to them, then we're not able to do our job.
And again, that goes back to who's in control of that wall time. Because if the custody of that patient can't be transferred from EMS to the hospital, then that EMS is gonna have to sit there. And it goes back to how we get the hospitals to cut down on the wall time. And then when you're talking about cutting down on the wall time, where you gonna put them? You know, so it's I don't know if we should label it a catch-22, but we kind of caught in the middle of between the decisions that's made medically and what we think. And I mean, just the fact that I'm a relative and you can't turn them over to me, you know, is frustrating in itself. See, because they have to sit there and they just have to wait. So, you know, hopefully what we're working on, and we can come up with solutions that make things better. But right now, you know, I still say that emergency response time is like Commissioner Kicklighter said, it's our baby. So we have to come up with those solutions. Yes, sir.
had a comment, and then I'll go to Fairmont.
Okay, so, I'm a caveat on that, and then I'll go over my points, if that's all right. So, in reference to the wall times, I think what we can do is either, as it relates to our, contract with Chatham EMS, give them more money to put more bodies, and be able to buy more ambulances, or we gotta help supplement the hospital costs so they can hire more bodies. The bottom line goes down to the handoff, just like you said, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Stone, because we're not trained medical professionals who fall under the governance of whatever hospital that is. They can't turn IT over to us. They have to turn that person over to another trained professional. So if we're not gonna if we don't have more ambulances that can go out so that we have, some in the hole, so to speak, that can sit tight, then the only other way we could really affect it, at least at this point, in my opinion, is to get with the hospitals and say, hey, how can we help you supplement your staff so that you can have some trained professionals to receive some of these bodies at peak times. So that, it boils down to the dollars, and correct me if I'm wrong in that regard. In reference to everything else, I think one of our main priorities should be workforce development, in that we're teaching people how to fish. When we're looking at the tremendous economic development that's taking place here in our area, just heard of another large entity opening a plant here, or soon to be opening a plant. We need to make sure that our citizens are able to take advantage of that, and take advantage of those jobs. Additionally, when we talk about workforce development, not just for the new jobs, but the jobs that we already have, because some folks are going to leave existing positions and go to, some of these plants. And so I think that works a lot in tandem with the chairman's efforts on One Chatham, and us working with our municipalities within the county to try to make that happen. Additionally, income-based housing or affordable housing, I think we have to work on making housing affordable. I know it's easy to say, oh, well, it's so expensive to build housing, so what if we stop trying to build housing and try to find ways to make housing affordable? I've shared with some of my colleagues an idea of a pilot program where we offer an abatement of some sort to folks who cap rents within the county. We can do that in some regard because it's not a direct benefit. We're not giving somebody cash, but we're giving them some sort of a tax abatement for them to keep rent at a certain area. That way, we're not relegating people of one socioeconomic category to a certain area, which will lead into that other little spot we see that says gang activity or, violent crime that we talked about. It creates a more collaborative approach, again, right in the vein of One Chatham. As it relates to transportation is another one, but in my thoughts on transportation are being proactive with infrastructure. And again, it goes right back into One Chatham, as our chairman has talked about before, and what Commissioner Kicklighter talked about. There's so many different entities that are engaged with infrastructure and roadways, but not just roadways. As Commissioner Farrell talked about, infrastructure includes fire hydrants and things of that nature. So how can we be more proactive? We know what's coming, so it's not hitting us. We don't have to wait until it's an emergency. Let's do what we can now. And then additionally in transportation, public transportation. I think that we look at the challenges that CAT is having at this point, and a lot of it boils down to the availability of drivers, or how many drivers they have. And so doing what we can, again, with our community partners as well as the municipalities within Chatham County, I think is something that we really have to look into. The last thing I want to talk about, last two things, emergency response. I want to applaud our police chief's efforts in community outreach as it relates to the police department and really building a bridge between the police department and the community. And I think another effort that we should focus on and make sure that he has the tools to actually implement is expanding diversity. When the police force looks like the community, it's easier to trust them. And so when a police officer comes into if any of y'all were to come into my house, right, you probably look at something and be like, what is this? Because it's my house, you know, but some of you may come to my house and say, oh, we have that too. And so ultimately the point I'm trying to make is whenever the police force looks like our community, it's easier for them to communicate, it's easier for them to build a layer of trust, and with that being the case, it allows a more proactive approach to ultimately help our community at large. The last thing I was going to say is efficiency within our own operations. I didn't see that on here, but we have, as Mr. Manager spoke about, like with 911, there are things that we have to work on. We can sit here and go through every department. I'm not trying to. We can go through every department and say everything that we need to do. But some things that we can work on is some of those community-facing efforts. One thing that comes to mind is business licensing. You know, what are ways that we can create efficiencies, and then through the One Chatham initiative, work with our municipalities to maybe create some sort of a standard across the board so that we are a place where people want to start businesses. Because if more people are starting businesses, then we are creating more jobs. That means more people are able to go and fish, and so then we don't have to throw fish fries for everybody through our blueprint. Additionally, permitting. When we're talking about permitting, sometimes permitting can be a couple of weeks, a couple of days, or a couple of months. In some cases, maybe even longer. Well, that is that red tape makes people want to not do business here. It makes people not want to expand business here. So looking at efficiencies within our own operations, I think should be a key priority, because that will, again, free up some money that we can dedicate to some of these other avenues or areas, but additionally, it'll make life a lot easier here.
Thank you. Comments? Yes, sir.
I'm not sure who to direct this question to, but where is the mandate coming that's keeping the ambulances at the hospital and not being released until the hospital taps you on your shoulder and says, you may go now?
All right, that's me. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. So there's several things I wanted to say. First off, we're all facing a very different world out there since the pandemic. You're having these difficulties with hiring people and retaining them and being able to pay, and so are we, and so is everybody else. The county, I just want to tell you, the county government has been really good to us, very good partners. We work closely with the 911 Center, with the police department, with Tara. During the pandemic, you helped us with some small grants that helped us put disinfecting lights in the ambulances to have it as a more clean environment for the patient. So you've really been, tremendous help to us. Phil has been doing now, we're coming on 3 years of weekly emails about the updates of how many ambulances are being held, how many minutes, the number of calls that we're not able to respond to. So that we've been updating county government every week for nearly 3 years on that. But staffing equals money. We have staffing problems also. And prior to the pandemic, we were working hand in hand with the administration to try to eliminate the subsidy that we get for zones 3 and 4, the far east side and the far west side of the county. But since, and it was over 1.2 million, it's at 600,000 now. But with the pandemic, we need money more, an increased subsidy, I'll just say it and put it out there, when fast food restaurants can pay more than we do on an hourly basis. So, politically, our response times are hurting. A little part of that is 911, a little part of that is our staffing, a little part of that is the hospitals. We don't even call it wall time anymore. We call it hospital bed delays, because that accurately labels what's going on. And what the hospitals have said, they said, we can't care for the patient, you can't leave them, we'll charge you, we'll file complaints against the EMTs and paramedics for abandoning the patient, which is a pretty serious offense. We recently, and Mr. Kegler's aware that I reached out to a national EMS law firm to get an opinion on what we can or can't do. And we're probably, our board directed me to do this, we're probably, we need to run this opinion past a local Georgia attorney because they're not licensed in Georgia. But basically, well, we're going to enact the federal EMTALA law. the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act that says once the patient is on the hospital's property, it's their patient and our obligation ends. Now, they're not gonna like that very much. And so we wanna have meetings, and we've been having meetings probably twice a month, all through with the hospital people, with county staff. County staff has been there also supporting us with the hospital executives. So we want to tell them, you know, this is what we're being forced to do, because you're all very well aware, we were just up in Atlanta. There are bills being proposed, politically motivated bills, to disassemble the statewide EMS system. And well, you think it's bad now, it would be chaotic and a lot more expensive if those bills passed. So it's kind of back against the wall time for us right now.
So the reason for the question is, why are you mandated to stay there until somebody taps you on the shoulder and say you may go? Is because the way I see it, EMS is the delivery truck, the delivery system. There's a problem out there in our community, a health problem, an emergency. You're tasked with transporting that person with their problem to the proper location, mental, physical, whatever the problem is. You know, the police transport criminal stuff to the proper place, the jail usually. EMS, health problems. To me, your mission starts when you get a call to go transport a problem, a person with a problem. It ends when the delivery's made. When the UPS brings a package to my house, they have completed their mission. They set it down, they deliver it, and they get on to the next one. When Home Depot delivers a truckload of lumber to a house to be built, they bring the lumber and they bring it to the location and they deliver it and they get on with it. The carpenters cut up the wood and build the house. At my house, you know, whoever gets the package, they get the package. In your instance, you're delivering a package, and when the package is properly delivered to the right portal, to me, you're done. Now, how irresponsible is it to hold somebody there, a delivery vehicle, an EMS emergency vehicle, at the proper location while somebody else out there is suffering and there's nobody looking after him or her? To me, that's a huge disconnect, and it needs to be solved, because with all the other issues that you're dealing with and everybody's dealing with, tying up a piece of equipment and trained personnel while somebody in some corner of Chatham County is suffering because you're handcuffed to a protocol that's beyond transportation. You are not the doctors, you are not the specialists, you are the delivery vehicles. So, to me, this needs to be solved very soon before some catastrophe happens throughout somewhere in Chatham County, because you're sitting there in a parking lot twiddling your thumbs waiting for somebody to tap you on the shoulder and say you may go. Well, you got emergencies to deal with. I want you to deal with them.
Chairman, may I just say, for the police chief, I think we have the best police chief around. And, I mean, I'm honestly thrilled with him. I simply, I don't think the chief should even been the one responsible over 911 anymore, and I think the fire chief should be responsible for the 911 system. I mean, I just don't see that being something they should have to be responsible for. But I think our chief's the best, and I just know we've got major problems that's not a result of anything he's done or not done. And I'm glad that some of these issues are coming out that's making that initial emergency response a big disaster, because it is a disaster. And
I've run probably 4 very high-tech 911 centers in my career, and Phil has also. And we do work very closely with your staff on trying to do process improvements. Right. And you all voted to implement EMD, EPD, and EFD. That's the worldwide best standard. It's one of the best things I've seen since I got here. And you don't even realize, from an emergency responder standpoint, what a great thing you did in that, and that's really gonna help people long before ambulances or fire trucks get on scene, because the dispatchers are gonna follow a protocol and deliver immediate aid over the phone long before we ever get there, so
And
give yourselves a hand for
to the emergency staff, whoever works on that, I want you to know, I'm not busting your butt either, because I think you've done all that you're within your abilities to do the best that you could do with the resources and everything that's available and the personnel to help work for you. It's just something that we together have to, I mean, like that one issue about the hospitals holding it, I mean, that's gotta be addressed one way or another, and that might take, I mean, I don't know what it's gonna take.
I can see you
Us
sitting
making
there
an appointment with some
parked
CEOs.
while nobody's calling.
We're in
Nobody
the,
calls, you gotta go. You can't just sit there and ignore a call somewhere because everybody's out on a call, and you're just sitting there waiting for somebody, a proper, I mean, we got these level 1 trauma centers and all, I mean,
Sometimes it gets ugly.
Do we have to
Get yelled at. Phil's been yelled at numerous times.
Do we have to get to a point where we say we're gonna not bring people to a specific, certain hospital if they're making our people, that we're gonna take them to the hospitals that don't? And work with it? I mean,
they got wall time at all of them.
Yeah, we don't have.
It's not just one.
Bed capacity. In fact, the new mental health facility has stopped taking intake from us. They've limited the number of beds they're making available, so that used to be a nice little.
It's not just one.
And we don't have that.
That's what I want you to know. It's not just, and let me say this too now. Remember now, our hospital is not owned by the county anymore, all right?
say that again, I'm sorry.
Our hospitals are not owned by the county
No,
anymore.
no.
It's not the hospital authority, because the hospital is a private entity. Right, and I don't know, and I'm going back to what Commissioner Farrell asked. Who made the decision? It had to be doctors or somebody who talks about custody of the patient, all right? Somebody had to make that decision in the hospital. Now, we are meeting with the CEOs and the chief will tell you, they've been on some of the meetings that we had with the CEOs of all of them, trying to figure out a way to get that cut down, all right? But we know, especially during COVID time, they had them all in every kind of room you could find to put somebody, okay? And I don't know, as I sit here today, I don't know in the last month if that has changed, because I have not had a meeting with them in the last month. But I do know that we've got to come up with a solution, right? And I'm not the brainchild in the room. I don't have that solution. But I think that if we could put our heads together, if we can come up with something that works, that keeps us from being delayed, because even after, and correct me if I'm wrong, even after you have transported a person, it takes, about 10 minutes or 20 minutes for that ambulance to be re-cleaned and resurfaced so it can be back up in
Our goal was 20 minutes or less.
20 minutes? Yeah, so if you sit there an hour, all right, and then that patient is transferred, then he's got to go to the cleaning station, I don't know if y'all call it that or not, and be re-sanitized.
Decontaminate the ambulance.
Decontaminate, there you go, thank you. And before it can get back in the service mode. So there are different, what I'm trying to point out, that there are different
Delays, right?
delays, all right? And so how we work on getting all those delays funneled into where we are able to answer calls as people get them and come in. All right? I think Commissioner Milton wanted to ask something about.
I wanted to say,
One more comment, because I'm
Okay.
running out of time.
okay, it's just, your guys are trained medical, they're not professionals, but, so while you're waiting for, because I, not the, Commissioner Farrell, I didn't want him to dehumanize the person, because he was talking about Home Depot and all that, coming and dropping stuff off. You can't.
Delivery is delivery. Delivery truck don't hang around once the package is delivered.
Hank said, drop them off.
First, it ain't no package.
Hand them off to the right authority and let them pick it up from there.
Dehumanize Commissioner Stone's reporter,
Yeah.
who needs somebody to be there. And
somebody
in
medical.
instances for you, you have somebody that's there that perhaps if that person needs CPR or needs something going on and the hospital is not ready for them yet, your personnel can help with that.
We maintain the care.
So, yeah, so I mean, the wall time is critical now because nobody's in the healthcare business much anymore or looking to go inside the healthcare business much anymore. I don't know how successful they're gonna be. That artificial intelligence is gonna play a big role in future's employment.
Mr. Adams is my last comment.
Did this wall time go in effect after COVID or before COVID?
No, it actually started for the first time probably around 2005 or 6, and then it went away, and then it reemerged with COVID with everybody getting overrun.
I asked that because when I got in a car wreck, they just dropped me off and put me in the hall for hours.
But somebody
custody
it off. Somebody, the EMS was like, this guy is complaining of this, and this. These are his vitals. But you weren't having breathing issues. You weren't necessarily about to have a heart attack. So, all right, we'll put him in the hallway. But
somebody took custody of him.
Yeah, somebody
in the hospital took custody.
Somebody who goes into a seizure or something in the hallway.
That's a difference.
Got you there.
To help.
All right, so each of you have stickers with money on them. You should have $600 total. So you have 4 $100 stickers and you have 4 $50 stickers.
Time to go shopping.
So I have listed what you have indicated as things that you want addressed. I would like for you to take your money and you can put it in those areas. And then staff will begin working across the various departments to see if we can bring back some opportunities to you with some ideas or recommendations, suggestions, because you all have brought up some great things. Some of this is policy, some of it's funding, some of it's ordinances, some of it's a lot of different things, okay? So we're not gonna get into the meat of exactly how they'll be fixed. I just need you to tell me where your priorities are. Does everybody understand what the task is?
Can I get Gators money?
Linda's got his money.
You can have mine.
All right, I'll take it.
If for some reason you get really ingenious here, you can tear it. Like if you got a 50, you can tear it in half, and I know that's 25. Okay? So I'm just giving you some options. But if you want to put, and Commissioner Kicklighter does this to me every time, put every sticker on one thing, that's okay too. That's your vote.
Nothing wrong with that.
Option to do that.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, I'm not. I know he's going to do it because he's done it to me every time.
I actually thought of not doing that today.
Okay, well, I just called you out for size.
I'm not gonna do it.
But before we do that, Mr. Chairman, after that, you want to make closing comments, or how do you want to handle that?
No, I'm just glad that we're working through these issues, all right? Because as you know, and let me say, apologize to all the staff and others for my tardiness in here, but I was over in MPO meeting, right? So, I have to flip from meeting to meeting. I flip from one to that one to now this one. And I just want you to know that collectively, we have to work on these solutions, all right? And the only way that we can work on these solutions is that you give it to me so that we can get it to staff, all right? And so that staff can get you the answers you need, because staff is honestly the ones who do the work, okay? They're honestly the ones who do research, but they will tell you whenever issue come up, I'm always asking them, where's the data that makes us come to an informed decision, all right? And I'll say to everyone here, without data, all right, without some proven facts that we can point our finger to, we have to be careful of what kind of decisions we make, because they'll come back to bite you, all right? And so I'm glad that we decided to do these kinds of things and to kind of get things in order, because I think that as we go from year to year, our priorities are going to change. As things develop in our community, things are going to be changing. And since I have everybody here, I just want to throw this out to everybody. T-Splot's going to come back again, all right? Because we went to D.C., we found some great news out of D.C., and when it gets here, we've got to be ready for it, all right? And so we've got to have skin in the game, or the good news that we turned in, that we got while we were in DC last week, will turn to sour grapes. And I don't want them to be sour grapes. I want them to be wine that you can enjoy. All right? Thank you.
So one thing that Miss Linda just asked, if you don't mind, on your dollars, these are the roles that will help us. So do you see us actually funding something, being a collaborative partner? If you can write that in, if you know, that's fine. If you want, we can bring that back up once we kind of figure out the priorities. But just know that we're going to need clarity on if you put that as a priority. In some cases, like emergency response, that is ultimately we will have multiple roles in that. But some other things, it may just be that we are the collaborative partner and we have that shared responsibility. So I just want to add that. If we don't get to all that today, we would be asking for that in the future.
Just do numbers like 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, so you can list number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1 would be actively doing, 2 is a collaborative partner, 3 is your convener facilitator, 4 is an investor, and 5 is an influencer. So you can just put a 1, 2, 3, 4 on your dollar, wherever you're going to vote, that would help me. You understand what I'm asking you?
No, $100, one $100 one. If that's the most important, put 1.
Well, if you want me to actively do it, you want us, the county, to do it, you put a 1. If you just want us to change and influence policy, you're going to put a 5.
On each one of our little dollars.
Yes, sir. And if you don't mind.
Are we gonna place these somewhere?
Yeah, you're supposed to place them right there on those doors. I've got everything you've mentioned over there. You just have to go vote.
You see, they got a
I
staple.
apologize, my ADD has kicked in full-fledged.
Can we help you a little bit?
In a real leave that up, please.
What about this? I can't rank it.
I'm ready to get the hell out of here.
Right.
Number 1 is that we are going to do it. That is our job, okay? Number 2 is that we are a partner. Number 3 is that we are the convener.
Yes, sir.
Number 4 is that we are the investor, which is where we're going to put our money.
But we're not
Number 5 is that there's a policy or something that has to be, we're going to influence something.
So if we want to be a convener and a partner, then we just say
Put both
5.
numbers on there.
I'll play it.
Excuse me. It won't be the first time.
We work it out.
Right.
Because I'm going to bring it back and say, this is what I understood y'all to say, and then you're going to say yes or no.
Man.
Y'all go for it. Go
All
for it.
right, go ahead. Put your stickers up when you got your stickers.
Whoever want to use my stickers, come by and get it.
No, you got to use your stickers.
Please use your
It's
stickers.
not fair.
Share them, y'all share them. I'm the one who have to carry them out.
It's good.